Howdy, and welcome to the Preaching Poetry Podcast. The Preaching Poetry Podcast uses poetry to inspire conversation and to rediscover the world. Let's get to it. Howdy. It's good to be back with you again today. The poem we're going to be going over this time is a poem called The Builders by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. All are architects of fate working in these walls of time, some with massive deeds and great, some with ornaments of rhyme. Nothing useless is, or low, each thing in its place is best, and what seems but idle shows strengthens and supports the rest. For the structure that we raise, time is with materials filled. Our todays and yesterdays are the blocks with which we build. Truly shape and fashion these, leave no yawning gaps between. Think not, because no man sees, such things will remain unseen. In the elder days of art, builders wrought with the greatest care, each minute and unseen part, for the gods see everywhere. Let us do our work as well, both the unseen and the seen. Make the house where gods may dwell beautiful, entire, and clean. Else our lives are incomplete, standing in these walls of time, broken stairways where the feet stumble as they seek to climb. Build today, then, strong and sure, with a firm and ample base, and ascending and secure shall tomorrow find its place. Thus alone can we attain to those turrets where the eye sees the world as one vast plain and one boundless reach of sky. Okay, beautiful poem, very musical, very rhythmic. Definitely the kind of poem that it's really easy to put into a song, right? All our architects working in the walls. I mean, obviously that was not going to work, but you get it. Like, it has that flow, it has the right meter, it has the right pattern. It has 9 different stanzas, and each with 4 lines with an A-B rhyme scheme. Okay, so it's a very simple poem in that sense, not terribly uncommon for poets of his day. Though some will tell you that it's really important to pay attention to the format of the poem. So I'd encourage you to go and look at this poem. We'll definitely be providing links and text to some of these poems. Some are in the public domain, others are not. So, can't necessarily show you full texts of poems that we don't own the rights to. But the point is, go and look at the words on paper or on a screen. Okay, you'll see that there are indentations, right? And that may be important. Some people say that is really important. The format with the indentation on the second stanza and the fourth stanza in each, the second and fourth line in each stanza. So it almost looks kind of like, it's indented and not indented, indented, not indented. And so it almost looks like it's supposed to be some kind of a building, like it's supposed to be an organized structure. And some will say, you see, you've got, he's building the poem on paper. It's a possibility. It's kind of a pun, right? He's building the poem on the paper, but it's called The Builders. Get it? Oh dear. I'm going to have to figure out how to put cricket sound effects in here. Anyway, this poem is a really interesting look at basically Longfellow's view of how we should look at time and history, how we should look at the world. So this poem, the first 4 stanzas anyway, are about our relationship to history. Okay, about how we ought to go about living our lives. When he says all are architects of fate working in these walls of time, some with massive deeds and great, some with ornaments of rhyme, well, that's an interesting concept, isn't it? So if you think back to the episode we did on Invictus, you may remember that William Ernest Henley said, I am the master of my fate, the captain of my soul, right? But here, Longfellow doesn't talk about fate that way. He says that all are architects of fate. You see, there's a really interesting idea here that sort of a determinism could be individualistic, meaning that we each have our own individual destinies. But I think what Longfellow is trying to get at here is he says we also have a collective destiny, that we are all architects of fate, and that we are collectively creating the world we want to live in. And so our fate is tied in with the fate of other people. Okay? And so you have this idea that we are all architecting fate, and we are all forced to work in the walls of time. That's just the way that it is. That's how the universe is set up. And some people are going to have massive deeds and great. You're going to have some people who make history. You're going to have some people who are powerful and important and movers and shakers. They're going to be your generals and your presidents and your inventors and your historian, well, not historians probably, but, people who historians write about. And then you have, me and the little preaching poetry podcast. We're not contributing anything massive or great to society, at least not yet. One day, fingers crossed, we'll get there. But the idea here is that we are all doing something, and Longfellow doesn't seem to put himself in that massive deeds and great category, right? He says some of us work with ornaments of rhyme. Some of us are just poets. Some people are doing grand, important deeds, fighting wars, running countries, building buildings, building businesses, whatever it might be. And some are just sort of writing poetry. But we all have a part to play. We all have things that we contribute. And so we cannot simply write off the ordinary and the mundane. We have to keep in mind that we are all responsible for the fate of our humanity, of our human race. We're all responsible, and we all have parts to play. The second stanza, he says, nothing useless is or low. Each thing in its place is best. And this is 100% true. Okay? There's nothing that's useless or low as long as it's in its place. If it's in the right spot. Light switches are awesome. They're really important. They're not big. But man, if you have a light switch that's too tall for you to reach, it doesn't matter that there's only one light switch, or maybe there's like 15 light switches, 3 of them work, a bunch of them don't. You got 12 dead light switches like that. That's ridiculous. If you overdo it on light switches, it's not a good building. It's not a good room. It's not well designed. Okay? If you build a house and you put these awesome bedrooms in this amazing, like a podcast recording studio and a movie theater and, like a game room with a bar and with pool tables, and you've got this awesome patio and all, but you forget to put a bathroom in it. Not going to be a very great building. Do you see what we're getting at? So there's nothing that's useless or low, but you don't want a building that's nothing but bathrooms. That's not helpful either. We want everything to be put in its right place, used in its right way. Okay? And so when we do that, he says that what seems but idle show may actually strengthen and support the rest. And I think it's important for us to see this not just with things that people do, but with people themselves. Right? There are people who might seem useless or low if you're looking at them in a really cynical way. But everything in its place is best. What seems but idle show strengthens and supports the rest. So you may feel useless, you may feel low, but you have a part to play. You are an important part, and who knows what would happen if you weren't there, because if you pull out 1 or 2 little blocks out of a wall, that thing is going to fall down. Okay? You have no idea how your life intersects with the people around you, and how what might seem like idle show, it may not seem like it's that big a deal, but it could have massive impact. And there are people right now who are doing amazing things, and nobody's heard of them. Nobody knows a thing about them. But 100 years from now, they're going to get really famous after they die. This happens in history all the time. Okay? So we cannot write anybody off. We cannot say that anyone or anything is completely useless or low, that it doesn't deserve to be here, because we don't know how those things all fit together until we start trying to pull them out. If you start playing a game of Jenga, one block may not seem like a big deal, but if you pull the wrong one out, the whole thing comes down. So no matter how trivial something that you do or some person in your life may seem, they're all important. Okay? And what seems trivial may be really, really influential later on. A good example of this, I've had a few different things going on in my life throughout the years, and I've had sort of different patterns that I've built around it. But I can tell you, when I was a younger guy, we're talking high school and college and whatnot, I had. I was in a lot better shape. I was skinnier, faster, all of that kind of stuff. You know how it gets. Anyway, I feel like I keep talking about, trying to lose weight on this podcast. But that's not the point, okay? The point is that one thing that I did when I was a young man was that I stopped eating breakfast because I wanted to sleep in. And that was a really bad habit to get into. I got to the point where I would, basically, just completely get rid of my morning routine because I wanted to sleep in as long as possible. But a morning routine, even if it's something as simple as getting up, pouring yourself a bowl of cereal, making a cup of coffee, taking a shower, shaving, whatever, those little things that we do every day, that little ritual sets us up for success. And I basically completely got rid of my ritual and had to work really hard to put that back in my life. And it's so beneficial. It's so beneficial. Just a little thing like getting up in the morning, making a cup of coffee. Okay? Getting up at the same time every day, doing things the same way, gives me a ritual. It gives me a sense of control over my life. It gives me a foundation that I can build on for the rest of my day. And these days, if I sleep in too late, I just don't enjoy my day all that much. I feel like I don't get to enjoy it like I could or should. I feel like I don't get to do as much that's productive and that's enjoyable as I want to. And so a little thing like a morning ritual might seem like idle show. It might seem like just going through the motions. But man, once you take it away, you can see just how much that impacts everything else. I wonder if I'd have been a better student in college if I would have had a morning ritual. I wonder if I would have been a better employee for a few years after that if I'd have had a morning ritual. Who knows? Okay. It says, for the structure that we raise, time is with materials filled. Our todays and yesterdays are the blocks with which we build. So Longfellow is urging you to take a long view of your life, to look at your yesterdays and todays, because it's not just those like years or chunks of our life that are the building blocks. We tend to break our lives down into chunks the older we get. But he says every day is a building block. Okay, he's encouraging us to look at the days that we have and how we spend them. Okay, think back to last time's episode where we talked about carpe diem, seize the day, pluck the day. We think about that. The days that we have are the blocks that we build with. So are we making the best use of those? Are we making each of those days the best, most solid, most beautiful blocks that we can for this tower that we're building? He says, truly shape and fashion these. Leave no yawning gaps between. Think not because no man sees, such things will remain unseen. And this is a big, big deal. Okay? Just because somebody's not watching you or paying attention to you in the moment, just because you're not, being held to an account or being held to a high standard by somebody right now in this moment, people are still going to see. Just because someone isn't watching right now doesn't mean that no one will ever see how you spend your life. Because remember, if every day is a block that you build with, eventually the structure is going to reflect your days. So just because somebody doesn't see what you're doing right now, they will eventually. If you're pouring concrete in a high-rise and you do it wrong, it doesn't matter whether somebody sees you in that moment. If you do it wrong and you just let it go and you don't fix it, people definitely going to see you when the building starts to lean sideways. And so it's really, really important, I think, for us to understand that just because something isn't well lit, well illuminated, common knowledge right now, it could be one day. And this can be both encouraging to us, seeing that, who knows, the little things that we take our time to do well may end up being seen and appreciated by people down the road, maybe by your children, grandchildren, by your, somebody that you'll marry or somebody that you will go into business with. Somebody that you'll mentor. All of those little things can actually add up to quite a bit. And just because nobody's watching you in this moment doesn't mean that you shouldn't be living your life like people are going to watch you someday. Man, it's starting to preach. Okay, so those first 4 stanzas, those are talking about our relationships to history, right? Now he's going to go and talk about the past, right? So remember, we're building a tower of humanity, of our collective fate all together, but we're not building it from the ground up because the foundations of it and the lower stories have already been built by people who have gone before us. So he says, in the elder days of art, builders wrought with greatest care, each minute and unseen part, for the gods see everywhere. Okay, so he hearkens back to days when other people were building. They built with care. Okay, and we owe it to the people who have done the hard work in our past of building us as a human race, as societies, as civilizations up. We owe it to them. We owe it to them to make good on what they have built ahead of us. Okay, he introduces this sort of accountability because the gods are going to see it. Okay, and you could take that to mean a generic sort of sense, as though whatever religion you may or may not aspire to, that those gods or that God will know the life that you live. But you can also look at it to say sort of people who are standing outside of our time and history. If you could get outside of our world and our universe and look at this tower we're building as an observer, why not give them a good one? Like, if we're going to be this sort of art piece for someone to observe, then why not be pretty darn good at it? So he says, let us do our work as well, both the unseen and the seen. That thing keeps popping up, the unseen and the seen. Make the house where gods may dwell beautiful, entire, and clean. So now the gods are not just observers looking at us, but now they're coming to live inside us. They're coming to live inside people. Okay, and so ancient ideas about gods were that their power really came from the worshipers who would be devoted to them. So if you built temples and you offered sacrifices and you did rituals, those gods would have the power to operate and do what you needed them to help out in the world. Okay, very different from Horace's Epicureanism, right? It's a little bit more superstitious, but this idea is that, the gods can see what's going on, and that they will come and they will basically work and function and dwell in these temples, and as long as we do the right things, then those gods will treat us favorably. And this kind of idea gets transformed a little bit when you talk about the more monotheistic religions, and Christianity in particular. In Christian scripture, the idea is that the Holy Spirit, that God will come and dwell inside his people. In the book of, I think it's in the Psalms, it'll talk about God being dwelling inside the praise of his people, sitting enthroned on their praises. So it's the idea that people sort of create this situation where God can come and live and dwell. And so Henry Wadsworth Longfellow says, if this is true, he does say gods, so I don't think he's trying to be overtly religious here. But I think what he's getting at is that if there's something more to our lives than just we exist and it's done and it's all going to burn in the end, if there is something else out there, if there really is a sense in which what we do reflects on these gods, or they will be observing us, looking at us, then maybe we should make what they see good. Right? He says, make the house where gods may dwell beautiful, entire, and clean. And that's a pretty good idea. Like, are you gonna risk that? If it's beautiful, entire, and clean, then maybe it won't get wiped out and knocked down. But if it's not beautiful, entire, and clean, if it's not a place where the gods may want to dwell, shoot, all of those things that you have done may be for nothing. All of those days that you spent seizing the day, living it the best you can, taking the day and straining the wine out of it. Like, if we don't do it well, it may be that it's not just that your days are all for naught, but mine too. And this is where Longfellow really starts to get into things, because he says, if we don't make that house our fate, if we don't make our human race this house where the gods may dwell beautiful, entire, and clean, he says, otherwise our lives are incomplete, standing in the walls of time, broken stairways where the feet stumble as they seek to climb. Is that the kind of building that we want to leave behind? So what Longfellow's trying to do is answer the question here, what gives your life meaning? And what Longfellow says is that doing your part, doing your best where you are, that is your purpose in our collective fate. And this reminds me of a really famous speech by Admiral William H. McRaven, Make Your Bed, the Make Your Bed speech. I think he gave it at UT Austin a few years back. And he gives this speech, and basically the idea here is his advice to people is to make your bed. Start your day off, your ritual. Okay, it may seem like it's idle show, but make your bed, because what that does is that teaches you self-discipline. It teaches you to be proud of yourself. You have something that you've already accomplished and done at the very beginning of the day. And he said that if you're going to be the kind of person who makes your bed, you will also be the kind of person who takes responsibility and lives your life in such a way as to strengthen and support this building, our collective humanity, to make it beautiful, entire, and clean. And, his spin on it is a little bit different, but I think the idea here it jives really well with Longfellow, that even something as small as making your bed, think of yourself not as just a random person making your bed, but as a part of a larger whole. And if you do, okay, then we can get to these last two stanzas. He says, "Build today then, strong and sure, with a firm and ample base, and ascending and secure shall tomorrow find its place." Remember Lucano from Horace's Ode? He says, don't trust the future. But here, Longfellow says that if we take care of today, then if we do it right, then tomorrow will have its place. That's a huge idea. Okay? We don't have to be anxious about tomorrow if we do today right. Remember, each day's got enough trouble of its own, so don't worry about tomorrow. But the choices that we make today impact our future. Okay? If I choose to go order a large pizza or extra large pizza and eat the whole thing tonight, hey, that's going to impact tomorrow and maybe the next day, and maybe not in pleasant ways. But if we live each day doing the best we can in that moment, if I eat healthy today, I'm going to feel better tomorrow when I wake up. And so we can impact our future with the choices we make today. Then he says, "Thus alone can we attain to those turrets where the eye sees the world as one vast plain and one boundless reach of sky." We're building a tower, a turret, okay, where we can see the world. We can be enlightened. This is a very optimistic view of humanity, of the world, isn't it? It's got powerful calls to do your part, to build a better humanity, to build a better society. And it calls to mind this image of a tower that the gods are coming down to inspect. And then my critique comes in like this, because if you hear a story of a tower and God's coming down to look at it and inspect it, where humans are working really hard to build a massive tower that is strong and secure, it reminds us of a story, another Bible story. We're going to reference the Bible a lot because a lot of these poets, they were pretty well read in the Bible. But this calls to my mind the story of the Tower of Babel, where humanity has one, they're one society. They're all together. They're building, they're working hard, they all speak the same language, they're all doing everything together, and they build this massive tower, and God comes to look at it and he says, "Oh dear, this isn't good. All of these people together, they may think they're going to achieve enlightenment, but really all they're going to do is bite off more than they can chew. And eventually it's all going to come crashing down." And so God, when he sees these people building this tower, he changes their languages, and they can't work together anymore, and they all sort of split up and travel all over the earth. And while that's an interesting sort of mythological explanation of language, okay, it gives us that sort of explanation of the world around us. It does make me think that if Henry Wadsworth Longfellow is building a tower on a plain, could that tower not be the Tower of Babel? Could this not just be hubris? This makes me question this poem, because I feel like we have to decide, are we going to read this optimistically? That we can attain to this lofty, grand tower where we can see everything, where we achieve enlightenment, where we get all the way up into heaven, so to speak? Or is this a cautionary reading wrapped in, optimistic propaganda? There's a reason that this is called the Preaching Poetry Podcast, right? We're going to let the poems preach their message, and then we have to weigh them. We have to decide, hey, is this legitimate? Is this not? Do we need to take this at face value or with a grain of salt? And so I like this poem, and it is an inspiring poem, but I want to read it with a little bit of not just optimism and not just caution, but with some exhortation. I think that the calls to make the most of your days, to live your life, even the things that it seems like no one's watching, as though it was on display for the world, I think to aspire to that is amazing. I think to aspire to that is a big deal. But I think we have to be careful, because we all recognize that we're not necessarily going to be able to do this 100% of the time. That we are flawed, messed up people. And that the tower that we're building is not some grand, glorious structure free of any flaw, free of any, crack, because it's made by people. And while I do think we should do the best we can, I don't think that we can really put our hope and our trust in this sort of progress of humanity. I think that we've looked at enough of world history in just the past 120 years, looking at world wars and nuclear bombs and climate change and all of the sort of chaos around us, and we can look and say, yeah, maybe we are not, maybe even us on our best days, we are not able to quite build this optimistic, beautiful tower that Longfellow is talking about. But even if the tower is a bit warped, even if it leans in places, even if it does have some broken stairways where people stumble as they seek to climb, I think that the idea that we should be careful how we build, I think that's a legitimate one. I just don't think we can put all of our trust in the collective success of humanity. I think we have to recognize that there may be parts of the tower we have to fix, we have to prop up, we have to rebuild. And that as a society, as humanity, we are always in a bit of a state of flux. But the exhortation, right? The exhortation to truly shape and fashion our days as the blocks with which we build, that exhortation is an important one. Because I would rather be part of the solution than part of the problem. And while we may not all agree on what the solution would look like, I think we all want to be the kind of people who build the best possible tower that we can. What do you think? Thank you for listening to the Preaching Poetry Podcast. I hope that you enjoyed your time with us, and we look forward to having you back for more. If you like what you heard, please be sure to leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe. If you're looking for more content, you can find us on Apple, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, basically anywhere you find podcasts. If you want to join our community, or just want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Preaching Poetry.